normally scrunched up.
Okay, we're ready.
So much better than it was just a couple of years ago.
Shall we get started? We will now reconvene in open session. The time is 2:52 p.m. For the record, in compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, no votes were taken or decisions made in executive session. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Dr. Trout, for hosting us for this meeting. Also want to say congratulations to you. I understand we had a record graduating class this year, so this semester. And I understand there's also a birthday coming up that we may be celebrating. So congratulations and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Okay, our next order of business is the approval of the previous meeting's minutes. I move that the minutes of the quarterly Board of Regents meeting held on February 16 and 17, 2017 be approved. Is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Regent Scott. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We will now hear reports and motions from the committees. The committees met prior to the board meeting to go over proposed items in detail, and I will call on the chairs of the committees to present their reports to the full board. And we'll start with Dr. Jaime Garza, Chair of the Academic Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Chair Salazar. The Academic Affairs Committee met telephonically on Monday, May 8th, 2017, and it was chaired by me with committee member Regent Salazar and student Regent McFarland in attendance, as well as representatives from our institutions and system staff. All action and consent items were reviewed, discussed, and approved by the committee to be moved to the full board. I will now make a motion for approval of each of these items. First, I move that Lamar University be authorized to offer a fully online 36-hour non-thesis Masters of Science in Nutrition within the Department of Family and Consumer Sciences in the College of Education and Human Development. This will be effective spring 2018, following notification to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and the Commission on Colleges of the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools.
Regents, there's a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Regent Williams. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Second, I move that Sam Houston State University be authorized to offer a degree program leading to the Bachelor of Science with a major in environmental science housed within the College of Science and Engineering Technology, to be implemented upon final approval by the Texas State University System Board of Regents and the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board.
Regents, there's a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Regent Tinsley. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
3, I move that Sam Houston State University be authorized to offer the Master of Arts in Mathematics in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics within the College of Science and Engineering Technology via distance learning at 50% or more as of September 1st, 2017.
There's a motion, Regents. Is there a second? Seconded by Regent Edwards. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I now move that Texas State University be authorized to add a Doctor of Philosophy major in Applied Anthropology.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Regent Edwards. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that Texas State University be authorized to add a new Master of Science in Nursing major in Leadership and Administration in Nursing degree program via distance education.
There is a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Regent Tinsley. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that Lamar State College Orange be authorized to award a certificate of completion in cybersecurity specialists.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second? Seconded by Regent Williams. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the certified enrollment reports for spring semester 2017 for the Texas State University system components be approved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Regent Scott. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Madam Chair, any remaining items are included in the consent agenda unless someone wishes to remove an item from consent. If not, this concludes the committee's report to the board.
Thank you, Dr. Garza. And as we said, each of these items were discussed during the committee call prior to the board meeting. Next up, we'll hear a report from Regent Allen Tinsley, Finance and Audit Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Finance and Audit Committee met telephonically on May 11th, 2017. I chaired the meeting, and Regents Scott, Montaigne, and Salazar participated, as well as members of the systems component, or the system component schools. The Finance and Audit Committee considered several items, and the committee agreed to move each item to today's meeting for the board's consideration. The first item on the agenda is Sul Ross University Law Enforcement Academy fee increase, as explained on page 107 of the board book. Madam Chair, I move that Sul Ross University Alpine be authorized to increase the Law Enforcement Academy fee to $3,000 for Academy effective August 2017.
Regents, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Regent Scott. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
The next item on the agenda is Texas State University System Adoption of Investment Pool Resolutions, explained on page 109 of the board book. Madam Chair, I move that the resolutions found on pages 110 and 111 of the board book for participation in Texas class and Logic investment pools be adopted.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Regent Montaigne. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? The motion passes.
The next item on the agenda is informational only concerning Texas State University System Statement of Changes in Fund Balances. They can be found beginning on page 115 of the board book. No motion is required on that, I don't believe you, Madam Chair.
No, sir.
The next item is informational as well. It concerns Texas State University System status of implementation of audit recommendations and can be found beginning on page 124 of the board book. The remaining agenda items are included in the consent agenda and include the establishment of 2 quasi-endowments at Texas State University, operating budget adjustments. This concludes the Finance and Audit Committee's report unless there are some additional questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Regent Tinsley. Next up is Planning and Construction Committee, and we'll hear from Chairman Regent Bill Scott.
The Planning and Construction Committee met telephonically on Tuesday, May the 9th, 2017, and discussed the items on the Planning and Construction agenda. I chaired the meeting, which was also attended by committee member Regent Williams, as well as by Board Chair Salazar. Representatives of the system offices and the component institutions were also present. The meeting was duly posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Law. The committee has moved unanimously to recommend all agenda items for board approval. I'll present the committee recommendation on the action items in the form of a motion. The first item on the agenda is the 2018-2023 TSUS Capital Improvements Program. I move that the Capital Improvements Program for fiscal years 2018 through 2023 as presented to the board be approved and adopted.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Regent Williams. Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second item on the agenda is the revision of the System Policies and Procedures Manual for Planning and Construction. Madam Chair, I move that pursuant to the System Rules and Regulations, Chapter 3, Paragraph 1.6, the revision of the System Policies and Procedures Manual for Planning and Construction attached to this motion in the board book be approved.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Regent Tinsley. Any discussion? If not, all in favor? And any opposed? The motion passes.
The third item on the agenda is an amendment to the TSUS process for public-private partnerships. I move that the process for public-private partnerships, P3, projects be amended as set forth in the explanation of this motion in the board book.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Regent Reeser. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? The motion passes.
The remaining items on the planning and construction agenda are consent items, and unless someone chooses to pull one of them, I move those be adopted. Madam Chair, this concludes the committee report.
Thank you, Regent Scott. Next up is Chairman of Rules and Regulations Committee, Regent Vernon Reeser.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Chairwoman Salazar, Vice Chairman Scott, Regents and Chancellor, as you may know, at its May meeting each year, the board considers revisions to its rules and regulations. This year, the process began in January when Regents and components were invited to submit suggested changes. Several campuses and system offices submitted proposed changes which were shared among all constituents system-wide. On April 19th of this year, the presidents met by telephone conference call with the Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor and the General Counsel to discuss proposed rule changes before final drafts were presented to the board's Rules and Regulations Committee for its consideration. As chairman of the Rules and Regulations Committee, I convened the committee's telephonic meeting at 2:01 p.m. on May 11, 2017. Committee members Regent Veronica Edwards and Regent Alan Tinsley were also present and participating, as were Board Chairwoman Rosanna Salazar, the Chancellor, the Vice Chancellor, General Counsel, the Presidents, System Director of Audits and Analysis, Deputy Vice Chancellor for Finance, and other members of the System Administrative Office staff. After considering the proposed changes, the committee voted to recommend all of the submitted changes to this board. Further, the committee voted to move the motion and the proposed rule changes to the consent agenda. If a member of the board would like to discuss any of the proposed changes, please do so now. Otherwise, the proposed rule changes will remain on the consent agenda and be passed with the other items on that agenda.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Next item of business is the Government Relations Committee report. Chairman Regent Montaigne.
Madam Chairman, I think Sean Cunningham's coming forward to give you a report.
Thank you, Regent Montaigne. Chairman Salazar, Regents, good afternoon. It's been a very busy quarter since I last reported to you earlier this year. Since we met in February, I'd like to share with you a few of the highlights specific to our system, and then give you a general overview of where we are at this point in time in the legislative session. While I expect that you are all waiting with bated breath in anticipation of how our system fares under the appropriations bill, I'm sorry if I disappoint anyone, but my remarks will be only focused on the non-financial part of the legislative session, and that Mr. Harper will be following my presentation with the latest information. Hopefully, his report will reflect where the budget negotiations are with respect to higher ed. Actually, I'm hoping by the end of my presentation, Daniel will actually gotten some email or text about how we were specifically treated under Article 3, but I will defer to him. While the TSUS, I'll switch by going to talk about the gala that you may remember during the last board meeting. While technically that was already in the past, I think it's relevant to comment on how well received it was among members, and Capitol staffers and alums, and also lobbyists who attended the function, and how it delivered a great start for our system so early in the legislative session. The very next week following the gala, Chancellor McCall and all of our presidents testified before the House Appropriations Committee. Some presidents and senior administrators from their respective schools have returned to Austin throughout this session to testify on specific pieces of legislation unique to their schools, as well as serving as resource witnesses that could answer questions about the impact of bills likely to affect the way they operate. Our Chancellor and university presidents traveled to Washington, D.C. in mid-March and met with senior officials from the United States Department of Education, and then later with Secretary Betsy DeVos herself. While in D.C., we hosted receptions with alumni, members of Congress, key legislative staff, and had numerous meetings on Capitol Hill to discuss issues important to our schools and to our students. Additionally, the TSUS Governmental Relations team retained a special consultant, Dr. John Goldberg, a longtime D.C. congressional professional staffer who's an academic with a long history of helping out the House Ag Committee, who's helping our schools understand the current and upcoming opportunities within the Department of Agriculture and other agencies related to the core strengths of our institutions. Chancellor McCall and our four-year institution presidents got to meet and ask questions of Dr. Goldberg while in D.C., and then led to Dr. Goldberg being invited by our presidents to visit our campuses to engage directly with our chief research officers, as well as the researchers most likely to benefit from the strategy that we are putting together in advance of the Farm Bill opportunity. That's to be considered by Congress within the next year. Just a quick note, Dr. John Hayek, along with our chief research officers, the Normandy Group, and Dr. Goldberg, will be visiting the Christmas Mountains in late May to complete this portion of the outreach that will hopefully lead to this strategy for the Farm Bill. We are pleased to have just learned this week that Lamar University received its non-land grant colleges of agriculture program designation from the United States Department of Agriculture. This is a direct output of Dr. Goldberg's involvement with Lamar. Returning our attention back to the Texas legislature, we've been busy with creating opportunities aimed at improving upon our relationships with legislators, various legislative staffers, and with alumni who have a strong presence within the Capitol complex. A couple of examples include hosting a working lunch in the Capitol with Chairman Montaigne when he was in Austin, working with Representative Dade Phelan's office, and in conjunction with President Trout and her team at Texas State, and our chancellor, hosting Capitol staffers for breakfast, tacos in the cafeteria, the Capitol cafeteria, where we got to meet with Texas State alums as well as with state representatives who represent districts in the Central Texas area. But last but definitely not least, my division has also been busy with bill tracking, bill passing, and bill shaping during the state's legislative session that's ending in 11 days and approximately 10 hours. From now, a special thank you is warranted to all divisions of the system office who have helped analyze bills, provide comments on legislation, provide data to aid the legislature in determining fiscal impacts of bills related to our operations. And finally, thank you to system office component institution staff and the all of our institutions that have actively engaged in helping legislators shape the policy that hopefully will have good outcomes this session. Two bills I'd like to specifically comment on involve legislation that our institutions requested that the governmental relations team help them garner the necessary legislative approvals. First, Lamar University has had difficulty with recent rule changes made within the State Board of Educator certification and needed the legislature to provide clear guidance that the SBEC should embrace the use of technology and consider the empirical data that supports the way in which Lamar is delivering their advanced educator certification program. This bill is authored and sponsored by Senator Creighton and Representative Phelan, respectively. The bill has passed the Senate and is awaiting a vote in the House before it can be sent to the governor ultimately for his signature. Secondly, Lamar State College, Port Arthur, and Orange are the only institution among their peers that are not currently eligible to receive JET funding grants from the Texas Workforce Commission. This would aid our local communities and business with equipment and tools necessary for the training of the local workforce in technology-related fields of study. House Bill 2431 by Representative Deschantel and sponsored by Senator Creighton seeks to remedy this exclusion, and the bill is currently awaiting final approval by the Senate when they consider the next local and uncontested calendar tomorrow. Now, moving our attention to the more general overview of the session and how things are taking shape at the time of this report, and just bear with me, things are fluid, things are changing. Things that may have changed just within the last 30 minutes of us being assembled here. The House is scheduled to take up a property tax bill that could push the 85th legislative session into overtime if it doesn't pass. The bill. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick on Tuesday signaled that he would request that Governor Abbott call a special session over Senate Bill 2, the tax bill, and the bathroom bill if they don't make it through the House. Speaker Strauss has indicated that he believes that if they pass the budget and they pass the sunset safety net bill, that he believes the House can go home. So that's a point of contention right now of the differences between the House and the Senate. Another sticking point that seems to be affecting negotiations between the House and the Senate involves the sunset bill that I had just mentioned. Without it, those agencies that are listed in there, that if the review of those agencies don't go forward, they run the risk of, quote, going out of business. So it's a must-pass bill in many people's mind. With respect to tuition freezes and set-asides, I believe you've heard about that recently and just over the last week. Tied up in the budget negotiations seem to have been these two bills where on Tuesday, the House moved to suspend the chamber rules to allow for the Higher Education Committee to take up several bills, but of those 18 bills that were posted, two of them, the freeze and the set-aside, among the top of the list. The most high-profile ones, 18 and 19, would eliminate a state law that requires schools to set aside a portion of tuition for revenue for financial aid low-income students, and Senate Bill 19, which is the freeze, would be for 2 years and then cap future increases at 1%. Both bills were listed as top priorities by the Lieutenant Governor at the start of the session. After hearing those bills Wednesday morning, the committee did not take any immediate action. The committee members could vote on whether to move them forward at any time, but that window is fast closing as a major deadline is approaching Saturday. That would have the committee's report bills out of committee to calendars for consideration. While the set-aside bill remains a long shot among committee members, the committee chairman did say in an interview after the hearing that that he was open to passing some sort of version of the tuition freeze bill if the universities fare well in budget negotiations. With respect to transfer of students and course credit related bills, there are several bills dealing with the measures to facilitate the transfer of students and course credit within the public higher education system. Senate Bill 2082 has passed both chambers. Senate Bill 802 was just voted out of the House Higher Ed, but Senate Bill 2122 remains pending in the House Higher Ed. So of those three, two of them are still in play. And I can furnish a list of those bills with more detail to our schools that are tracking those closely. The coordinating board's oversight and authority functions. Several bills dealing with placing limitations on higher education institutions and their efforts that would expand their operations have been heard. Recently, Senator Seliger amended a local bill affecting Texas A&M to include his more comprehensive bill, but it is unclear if this amendment will remain on the bill when returned back to the House. Additionally, several bills dealing with community colleges and public junior colleges being permitted to offer limited programs or baccalaureate degrees have been heard in committee. One of the more high-profile bills, Senate Bill 2118 by Chairman Seliger and Representative Davis, allows the coordinating board to consider allowing community colleges offering limited baccalaureate degree programs with certain parameters or safeguards that they can support those programs that those programs in the future. Moving our attention to sexual assault prevention and reporting of those incidences, we have HB 16, perhaps the highest profile of those bills. They relating to sexual assault, family violence, and stalking at public and private post-secondary educational institutions. The House bill was recently amended by Senator Watson, who's the sponsor. He amended it in Senate Higher Ed, and it passed and recommended for the local and uncontested calendar, but could find its way onto the general intent calendar if folks are so willing to amend it. The substitute incorporates portions of Senator Watson's other campus sexual assault legislation and primarily features, or the primary features include amnesty for victims who report the assault, permitting anonymous reporting via website, and the furnishing of evidence to the parties subject to the proceedings occurring within the campus structure 5 days before a proceeding takes place. With respect to Hazelwood, the bill's dead. Doesn't seem to be any traction. There's no indication that any attempt will be made to address any structural changes to the existing program. Currently, we have had over 6,631 House bills and Senate bills introduced, and only 165 have passed. So it shows you just how hard it is this session and advancing legislation, which is all the more of a testament to Lamar and Lamar State College Orange and Port Arthur for having their bills still in play and still able to navigate the legislative gauntlet. As I indicated earlier, Saturday is the last day for the House committees to report Senate bills, and Tuesday marks the last day for the House to consider Senate bills on second reading. As you see, that these deadlines are fast approaching, and any effort of these major items that I mentioned earlier for them to actually start or to ultimately get through the process without any delay, the clock is ticking, and the fate of some of these bills are in the balance. This concludes my legislative report. Please know that once the last gavel strikes sine die, we'll be sending a final report that lists all of the bills we were tracking that made it to the governor's desk. Thank you for your support, and I'm happy to turn it over to Daniel Harper now with the hope that he has good news that can make us happy when the skies are gray. Thank you.
Sean, how many bills were you tracking?
Rough estimate, 140 maybe?
Well, thank you, Sean. Good afternoon, Regents. I'll start with that. Unfortunately, my update will be light and inconclusive. So, the House and the Senate appropriation bills are very similar when you look at bottom dollar. They were both at about $218 billion, which is a good thing. The largest difference between the two is the use of the rainy day fund in the House versus the Senate chose to look at the deferral on the TxDOT transfer. For higher education, in both bills as they stand today, both chambers maintained either the lower of the 16-17 funding rate or the general revenue that was in that formula, and that is a good thing for us. Research funding was reduced by 10%. The higher education fund and TRB debt service are fully funded, which is good for us. On financial aid, the House looked to add 10% to the Texas grant program, while the Senate was looking to add around 5%. For health benefits, which will continue to be a growing concern for us, health insurance costs are estimated to increase with ERS at 8% a year, and the legislature is looking to cover about 80% of that cost for the state-funded employees. The most significant difference between the two chambers is how they handled special items. For our sector, which is the general academic and the state colleges, the House had a targeted reduction by program that was between 0 and 14%. But the overall reduction was around 9% for special items, which was $60 million. The Senate version in January started with 0, which was a $600 million savings to the Senate, which they subsequently added back $325 million in their version, which was still a 47% reduction. Additionally, the Senate took an alternate approach to restore those funds. They restored them through the existing formulas, but in order to balance the results, they had a hold harmless at minus 10%, and then they called it an equity adjustment that reduced, had a minimum reduction of 6%. The House version reduces the operational support for our components by right under $12 million, which was 2.6%. The Senate version reduced the TSUS operating support by $32 million, which was 7%. The impact, of course, it varies by component. Lamar University, Lamar State College, Port Arthur, and Sul Ross, under both proposals, saw a reduction in state support. Sam Houston and LIT both saw a modest gain, and Orange and Texas State were essentially flat in both versions. The Conference Committee on Senate Bill 1 has closed out most of the articles, with higher ed being unresolved as of now. But we're hopeful that there will be some conclusion by this weekend, but we have little indication on where they're going to land between those two versions. But I do remain optimistic that the legislature will fund or will maintain the funding structure that they've had before without the hold harmless equity adjustment the Senate introduced, and that they're across-the-board reduction to special items. So that concludes my incomplete update. Thank y'all.
Madam Chairman, I'd just like to thank Sean Cunningham, Pierce Mitchell, who are over there every day. And I guess most of the end of the session, Daniel, you're over there every day. And then also, our chancellor and every one of you presidents have done a fabulous job with your staff. Every time I talk to Brian, one of you's testified you've done an excellent job. And we just have to keep at it and get the best result we can. But if we're doing as well as anybody is in this process, and probably better than most. So you ought to be all applauded. And I know you're ready for a break, and you don't really want a special.
Thank you, Dave.
I conclude my
Thank you. And I second that. I know how hard you all work at the Capitol. I see you there, and so thank you for all that you're doing, including the presidents, of course. Okay, let's move on. The board will now consider contracts, miscellaneous, and personnel items. And first up is the approval of contracts. All items in the contract section have been moved to the consent agenda. Dr. Gomez is available to answer any questions any of the regents may have regarding any of the contracts. If not, our next order of business is personnel. And the first item is from the Texas State University System regarding the delegation of authority to implement fiscal year 2018 compensation to the chancellor. Is there a motion? Dr. Garza.
Madam Chair, I move that the Chair of the Board of Regents be authorized to finalize fiscal year 2018 compensation negotiations with the Chancellor and to communicate the same to the Vice Chancellor for Finance for implementation into the fiscal year 2018 budget.
Second.
There's a motion and a second from Regent Montaigne. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Garza. Next item is also from Texas State University System regarding the delegation of authority to implement fiscal year 2018 compensation adjustments for the Director of Audits and Analysis. Is there a motion, Regents?
I'll read the motion. I move the Chair of Finance and Audit Committee be authorized to finalize fiscal year 2018 compensation negotiations with the Director of Audits and Analysis and to communicate the same to the Vice Chancellor of Finance for implementation into the fiscal year 2018 budget.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Regent Garza. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? The motion passes. Personnel reports may be found on the consent agenda as well. Next item is miscellaneous. And the first item here is from Sam Houston State University regarding the authority to resolve Sam Houston State University versus American Campus Communities litigation. Dr. Hoyt, any comments you'd like to make?
Well, Madam Chairman, I think we talked about the issue regarding this ongoing lawsuit for Sam Houston Village. Mediation is scheduled for the end of June, and so we're asking for authority, should the mediation come with a positive result, to settle this. Thank you.
Regents, is there a motion?
Madam Chairman, I move the President of Sam Houston University, upon the advice of legal counsel, take such actions as she judges reasonable and necessary to mediate and, if possible, settle the Sam Houston State University versus American Campus Communities litigation.
Thank you, Regent Montaigne. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Regent Scott. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Hoyt. Our next item is a walk-on item from Sam Houston State University that was not available in time to be included in the board book materials. The motion is on the screen, and hard copies have been passed out to the regents. Sam Houston State University is requesting approval to finalize gift and transfer land at Grand Central Park to Texas State University System on behalf of Sam Houston State University. Dr. Hoyt, any comments?
We have commitment letters that we've been receiving from the Johnson Development Company for the transfer of land at their new development, Grand Central Park in Conroe, Texas. Is where we will locate the academic building for the Osteopathic College. And trying to finalize language on that. We are turning in our accreditation documents, and so would like to have approval to finalize that gift so that we would have the actual land transfer prior to the accreditation visit later this summer.
Any questions, Regents? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion. Should I?
Yes, sir.
I make the motion that the Chancellor and President of Sam Houston State University, upon the Vice Chancellor and General Counsel's review and input, as to the legal form, be authorized to execute documents related to the gift and transfer of land located at Grand Central Park from Johnson Development Corporation to Texas State University for the purpose of building a university health science center.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Regent Jaime Garza. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Hoyt. Our next item is from Sul Ross State University, naming of Zuzu Verk Memorial Amphitheater. Dr. Kibler, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Well, it's a relatively unusual circumstance in two measures, to propose to name something after a student, but also an extraordinarily unusual circumstance about this student, both what caused her name to receive statewide, regional, and actually national attention. And virtually all of you know the story. She went missing last fall, and there was efforts that brought in law enforcement really from around the state and in some cases around the country in the efforts to find her. In the end, her body was found, and but during that time, an extraordinary developments took place that many people have now dubbed the Zuzu effect. As it brings community together, it brings collaboration between folks. It also brings a lifting up of the entire culture and the community around that, and also the extraordinary stories that we learned about that particular student, those that didn't know her well or didn't know her at all. It was an amazing story, and actually has a continuing impact on our campus. She loved the outdoors. She made major contributions to our campus. The first ever event that was held on our campus at this facility that we're proposing to name after this was a community-wide memorial service in honor of her that attracted hundreds of people on our campus throughout the community and others. And so we felt it appropriate as we continue. I mean, the Sul Ross community and the Alpine community have adopted her family, her parents and her brother, in many ways, so we felt it appropriate to name the amphitheater itself, where you all will see it all when you're there in August, where you have beautiful panoramic views of the mountains in both directions, depending on which way you turn. That would have been a favorite place on our campus for this particular student, so we would like to memorialize her by naming the amphitheater piece itself after her.
Such a fitting tribute to such a tragic
Yes, ma'am.
story. Thank you very much for bringing that to us.
Sure.
Regents, is there a motion?
That Sul Ross State University be authorized to name the outdoor amphitheater the Zuzu Verk Memorial Amphitheater.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Regent Tinsley. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Our next item is also from Sul Ross State University, revising the mission statement. Dr. Kibler, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
We've been engaging for, I guess by the time it was finished here just recently, over 14 months, redoing our strategic plan, which we will introduce to you all and really in appropriate fashion at the meeting in August. But part of that, I asked this, it was a faculty-dominated committee that actually ended up having faculty and staff, well in excess of 100 people that worked on our strategic planning process, the assessment component that goes with that, but also looked at the mission statement. And I think they did a fine job where actually, in order to appropriately express our mission and our purpose, but have it not be a page long, they actually broke this down into 4 pieces. One is an introductory statement about who we are. There's a vision statement about where we're headed, a mission statement that sort of defines the essence of our institution, and then adopted a list of core values. And so all of that is contained in one, and we will be presenting that with your approval in various locations as a set, all 4 of those statements together to present that statement. So since it is a revision from what we had before, we just present it to you for your consideration and consent for us to go forward with that, which we think is a fitting description of Sul Ross's purpose as well as where we're headed and what we stand for.
Very good. Very nicely laid out, very direct and simple and powerful. Regents, any questions or any discussion? Is there a motion?
Madam Chairwoman, I'll make the motion. If you can scroll down. Madam Chairwoman, I move that Sul Ross State University be authorized to change its mission statement to reflect its current stature as a comprehensive master's degree granting multi-campus university, providing on-site and distance education with an international vision and core values that include excellence, ethics, and integrity, diversity and inclusiveness, leadership, and service.
Regents, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Regent Scott. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Our next item is from Texas State University regarding amending the bylaws of Emmett and Miriam McCoy College of Business Administration Development Foundation. Dr. Trout?
Madam Chairman, I think this is pretty routine. It's a lot of cleanup. It does do things, though, that are substantive, such as changing what constitutes a quorum, changing the minimum number of members on a committee. But it is pretty routine.
Regents, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that the Board of Regents approve the amendment to the bylaws of the Emmett and Miriam McCoy College of Business Administration Development Foundation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Regent Williams. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? The motion passes. Our next item is from the Texas State University System Foundation regarding revising bylaws. Mike Wintemute, I believe, is going to talk to us. Mike is the executive director of the foundation, and he'll discuss the proposed changes.
Regents, these are largely housekeeping items. The bylaws of the foundation were last updated in 2012. These proposed changes were circulated to the foundation board several weeks ago without comment or concern. The changes that we're proposing simply bring the bylaws up to date with how we practice on a daily basis. And so I'll go over them very briefly. The first involves the changing of the address of the foundation to the preferred address of the system office, the preferred address of the U.S. Postal Service from 200 to 208 10th Street, and authorizes a second change of address when the system office moves again later this year. It increases the number of directors from 5 to 7. It replaces one annual meeting with 4 quarterly meetings, which is the way business has been conducted for many years. It adds the executive director to the list of officers of the foundation and outlines his or her duties. It changes the first day of the fiscal year to September 1st to align with the system office fiscal year. And it adds or she or her where the pronouns him or her or him or he are currently cited. And that's the motion in summary.
Very good. Regents, any questions?
No questions, but one comment. I'm on the foundation committee, and we did go over it, and I did tell them that I was glad they added the her in the, in the language.
Yes, thank you.
But it's just to do what we're already doing.
Okay, then, if there are no questions, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that the attached amendments in the bylaws to the Texas State University System Foundation be approved, and that the address be changed, that the address change reflected in Article 1, Section 2 be effective until the foundation's move to O. Henry Hall after which the address stated in the bylaws shall be 601 Colorado Street, Austin, Texas, 78701, or such other address as may be assigned by the United States Postal Service.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Regent Tinsley. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. The remaining action item in the miscellaneous section has been moved to tomorrow's agenda. The next item is the gift report, and it can be found on the consent agenda. So if there's no further business, we will recess for the day and reconvene in open session tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And for the record, the time is 3:40 p.m. Also, just a note, if you are attending tonight's dinner, please be in the hotel lobby by 5:30. And that concludes our day. Thank you.